Hello, everybody. This is Harpreet. Welcome to the first edition of a podcast series that I'm starting called Product and Flow. Here, I talk about my interests: product management, AI, entrepreneurship, and meditation, in no particular order. To kick off the series, I invited my co-founder and co-CEO, Kohsuke Kawaguchi, who's also known as the creator of Jenkins, in addition to being known as the creator of Launchable. The conversation is split into two parts. The first, we're talking about the technical side and what's happening in the DevOps space, CI, tooling, um, AI, and then on the entrepreneurship side. Let's dive into this. Okay. How about an intro about yourself?
Sure. So as you said, I'm probably best known as the guy who created Jenkins. I'm Kohsuke. I came from Japan. Maybe what is it? I came here in 2001, so I've been here in Bay Area for a while. But I've been doing new startup with you, Launchable, for the past 4 years, and I'm here to try to see if I can redefine myself from the guy who did Jenkins to the guy who did Launchable.
All right. Sounds exciting. I think you've already defined yourself. If after 4 years you haven't defined yourself as the guy who did Launchable, then there's a problem. So the way I was thinking about this conversation is, I know there's a serious set of fans that follow you, and they think about software delivery and continuous integration and so on and so forth. So I want to get that piece out so the people who care about that can get into the technical side of the house. And then, the journey that you and me started together was the entrepreneurship angle. So I want to spend some time later in the conversation doing that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good. So let's start with Launchable. Like, give me a background. What does Launchable do today?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things I did with Jenkins is to push the state of the automation forward, right? So a lot more teams are doing a lot more things around software development in automated manners, and they're producing lots of data left and right. And that was around the time when the big data is a thing. I guess it still is a thing. And then now except maybe it's called AI, so it's a wave, might have been named itself. But the fundamental idea is wherever you have larger amount of data beyond certain threshold, so like a phase shift happens, and it can enable things that's previously impossible. So, I thought that this is a perfect opportunity to do just that in the space of software development. I started seeing some teams doing that. So when I see the recent, the part of the wave shift, the LLMs and so on, well, I didn't say I could predict that, but I see very much this continuations of this trend and the mega trend rather. So I feel like I got that part right.
And so, as part of this mega trend, what was the hypothesis for Launchable? What does it specifically do?
Yeah, so I guess we assume that the software development is going to continue to flourish. There'll be more software than what we could possibly keep up to, right? So there's the ever-relentless drive to drive more efficiency out of that process, and at the same time, the compute is getting cheaper and cheaper, and then the humans are not. And then, so relatively speaking, we need to harness a lot more computing power to make humans more productive. And then so I think that's like a fundamental bet. And then we thought, okay, so where that did start, where is the data is abundant. The one is the more operational production side, and we see companies like Datadogs, which I'm a big fan of, and they're using data in production, completely redefined what the ops people do. And the next step away in my mind is the QA people. Like a testing is another large, big data domain, like a lots of slowness and struggle. And generally, people are trying to move up stack. So that's the first landing that we chose. Yeah.
So where are you in the journey today? What does the product do today?
So the first, I think in the beginning of this company, we focused on this problem of test selections, which kind of came for me very personally in the Jenkins project, where I had to wait for 1 hour quote unquote unit testing for every single line change, which really slowed us down. And I know that in grand scheme of things, that's even on the better side. I regularly talk to people who count test execution time in days. right? So like, what if we can run only the meaningful subset to the tests? And then it sort of expanded from there. The people are selecting tests, it turned out, that not just for quote unquote meaningful tests, but commonly, let's say, splitting tests in parallel, which is a form of test selections, or ignoring the flaky tests from the PR merge, which is another form of test selections, rerunning failed tests, yet another form of test selection. So lots of different ideas in this general umbrella. So that's the first leg of the journey. And then we started thinking, okay, really the flakiness is very pervasive, and then that's part of the reason people are running selecting the tests, and we can tackle that problem head on. So that's been high on the radar for the past, I'd say, maybe 2 or so years. And lately, I think we've been further expanding the product to cover what we call triage, which is really encompasses the entire human activity of, okay, a test has failed, so there's a dead body here. Now somebody needs to go look into how this murder happened, what change killed this poor victim, and kind of go from there. So yeah, I've been in a team that's been doing that regularly, their daily meeting at Sun Microsystems for that, and I know that a lot of teams does it. So yeah, it's felt like a very progressive expansion of the product.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you spoke about flakiness. Having seen that myself, I didn't quite realize the pervasiveness of this problem in teams. And just in the last year, we've been having conversations around this with lots of people, and it always comes up.
Yeah.
So always comes up, and it's one of those things where I guess devs are non-complaining types. So this never reaches the ears of their management, and so management is likely not aware of some of these things, or if they are, not taking action. So what's the unique thing that you are doing here?
Well, I don't know if there's not so much truly unique things in the world. I like to think what I'm doing is more about democratizing democratizing practices that maybe only some cutting edge ahead of the curve teams are doing, that quote unquote the obvious ideas. But the most of us are too busy actually building the product and no time for solving these problems.
Right.
So yeah, that's maybe I see my role more as a bee. I go from one flower to the next, and pick up the practices that make sense. And I'd like to think I'm good at building a general purpose solutions. So I build them in ways that everybody else could use. So how does that translate in the space of flakiness? Well, the one is just measuring the flakiness, right? You talked about the devs unable to communicate the impact to the managers, and managers not being able to work on those things. That's in part because they don't know how much impact it creates.
Yeah.
They kind of have to trust the engineer's word for it, and their time is precious, which is never a successful formula. So we try to quantify them. The other thing that the people often do is to kind of track down where the flakiness came from. And what often happens is somebody makes a change that makes something flaky. But that change, in order for that change to land in the mainline, they only need to have one clean run. So if you retry things enough times, you get that. Now somebody in the mainline is left with this bag of shit. You have to track it back to the branches, and I know a lot of people struggle with that. So those are things that we are having. Yeah.
And the bee is now sort of moving on to the next flower, which is you called it dev test triaging workflow. And that seems also to be a space that I was surprised that there are not enough players in this space actually fixing these things. So what is the problem that you discovered here?
Yeah. So right. So I guess the story kind of starts from where a test failure happens, right? So say you are responsible. You're the guy in charge of making sure that the main branch is clean. And then in a small team, that's kind of a trivial job, but in a large team, there's lots of teams landing lots of changes. There's always some issues. And no devs are paying attention to those because they are in the component team. They care about their little world. You have a higher view, like you stand in a higher vantage point. So yeah, the failure happens. You need to see, is this a net new problem? Because there's always, in a big system, there's always some problem going through. And you can't ignore those, or the flaky failures, which you can't really quite ignore, but you have to treat them differently. So here is the actual dead body. So what has caused that? Your end-to-end test might be just saying that the button didn't show up, but you know that the real cause of it is somewhere in the back end. So there's some real detective work, and then you need to pass it back to the right component team and wait until the fixes arrive and reevaluate and pass the feedback. And so those are all, like a very everyday activity, but nonetheless it takes people's time. So that's what we call triage. And yeah, it's kind of crazy that these unsexy programs excites me, but that's who I am.
I was one of the things that we've discovered on this journey is like people think QA is not is on its way out, but we see that everywhere, and we see this trio of dev and QA and CI, these three bodies. And I just started watching this show on Netflix called The Three Body Problem, which says when these three bodies are, three suns are around, the environment is unstable. So in some ways, I was just thinking like there are these three sort of personas, they're doing the inverse of things, which is like there is an unstable environment, and like these three bodies congregate to make the environment stable and take that forward. And that is a very underappreciated job. It's just your point about, it's an unsexy problem.
Yeah. It's a rather go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a rather poetic take on this quote unquote the three body problem, because it's like a literal physical sense of it is a very different things. But, no, great.
So what's your longer term vision for Launchable? What, if you were looking like 5 years ahead, what would you want to accomplish in this space?
Yeah, I guess the things that I like to often talk about is like imagine more automated, like a self-optimizing delivery pipeline. And like my go-to example is like the branch merging strategies. The people, in the small, let's see, in the beginning there was just like a mainline only development where people just land their changes directly to the mainline. And then it comes with its own set of programs. So nowadays, like the pull requests and creating a feature branches and merging them is probably like a mass volume zone integration strategy. But it really only works when you're a small team. So when these things get bigger, you have to further create a hierarchy of them, which is call it microservices or modular development. Like each module have its own separate branches, and they get integrated and tested. And so these things get layered. And these phase shift happens in a very noticeable, clunky way, because delivery pipeline that the people create are hardwired around those, and so you can't really easily change them. So even though it's like the phase of the project, it moved from infancy to maturity to old age until it gets to the grave, you can hardly change. Often, like you see a very suboptimal pipeline put together for the different part of the life. So I want to see if you can like automate that. It's a quote unquote just an optimization problem. So humans wouldn't have to be designing those, and they are not doing the good job anyway. So that's I guess like as close to a vision as it gets, because I guess I generally like not. My like life motto is like goal is overrated. It's like the micro gradient descent all the way. Like,
right. The system is more, the process is more important.
Locally optimize and see where that takes you.
Okay. So moving on from Launchable, I think we've been here like 15 minutes. So what's exciting in the dev tooling space?
Right. Yeah. So dev tooling. Well, I guess the LLM is obviously kind of like a big topic of the conversations, and that's the obvious, that's probably most exciting disruptive things happening at the moment. I think within a much time span of a year or two, like everybody's using the LLM as a coding assistant. And then so that's it's like I guess the least possible sexiest way to call it is like a better auto completion, and then that's that's surprisingly like adaptive and useful. And it's, I mean, some people like I talked to, it's probably better than the Boolean. It could be on par or like than some of the engineers, the human engineers, since that comes in a great spectrum. So yeah, that I can see that has a huge impact. And then,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and then like for more like higher end of developers, like it's still incredibly useful tools for rubber duck debugging. And like people you talk to figure out. My wife is great at this. Like she just talks and talks and talks and then in that process she figures out the solution on her own. Like I'm not really contributing anything other than essentially just echoing back, and we all do that, right? So that's that I've been using it that way. So, and then beside those, in my mind, proven use cases, people are running all sorts of fun experiments and science projects. So when you get time, like it's fun to follow some of those. And
so what's one that's standing out for you?
Oh, the science project.
Yeah.
What's the more interesting science project in this space lately? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can. I mean, I guess what you and I have been talking a few days back, I suppose, is like a Devin. It's like this, or Autodev rather. Or yeah, Microsoft has this paper around more, I guess, the LLM that is given access to enough of an external environment that the developers get, and then so that creates enough of feedback loop. So yeah, it's a fun science project. And who knows, with the money of Microsoft, it could happen. That's a fun part.
I came across this term in AI space, either you're GPU rich or GPU poor. Where do you fall? And like realizing that you're GPU poor and you're then trying to get into the GPU rich space doesn't quite work. So yes, with Microsoft money, if certain GPU rich, they can solve problems that we can just dream of.
Yeah, and NVIDIA, like that's truly a Sun Microsystems of 2020. It's like
I actually know somebody there, and he was telling me that a lot of the Sun engineers, hardware engineers, have landed, in NVIDIA, and it's like it's the same. I'm not surprised at all. It's just phenomenal the impact Sun has had in the ecosystem here.
Yeah, I mean.
All right. So moving on, I think this was interesting. I wanted to spend some time on the entrepreneurship angle.
Sure.
I do want to talk about that piece in my podcast. So what inspired you to jump into entrepreneurship?
Well, so it's, I think, in the part, so this was what,
2019?
10-ish,
okay.
I think. So some was, they going on that 10-year decline ever since I joined, and people left in the company left and right. And, Jenkins was already becoming, or the software that became Jenkins was already becoming pretty popular. And I started thinking, well, there gotta be something you should be able to do around here. Or like, they put more resources into projects somehow. But I guess I was happy enough with Sun that I'd never really just kind of that crossed the threshold. And then Sun got bought by Oracle, and Oracle was such an easy, obvious place that I didn't want to work for. So it's really, I did it like, it's not so much like I got inspired and the positive pulled me away into this new trajectory. It's like the sense of, I got to escape from here. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you got pushed into entrepreneurship. Well, that's the way to go.
Yeah, but I'm so grateful for Oracle. I really do, because without that, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was going to get into. Like that's kind of life's every story in every part of life, I think.
Yeah, like when you reflect back on life, like that's one theme that I see is like if you're not moving enough and you get pushed out into something, right? That usually, if you stand back a few years later, it's usually a positive event.
Yeah. Exactly. And it
Yeah.
almost makes you wonder if there's any point in trying to be smart about your choice, because it's
Yes.
retroactively, like the things that you gained and things that you suffered has nothing to do with what you thought you're gonna get or lose.
Uh,
You might just throw a dice and be done with it. Yeah.
I'm actually there with you. It's
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this topic philosophically for the last year. But this reminds me, I know you follow Bollywood, so there is this, Bollywood star Amitabh Bachchan.
Hmm.
He had this quote, and his father was a poet that said, "Man ka hua to acha, nahi hua to bahut acha," which translates into, if things happened according to your wishes, that's great. If things didn't happen according to your wishes, that's even better because
Mhm.
it's sort of opening something that you
Right.
never imagined.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one that you actually intentionally went down the path is you were a CTO previously.
Hmm.
You're primarily doing product in Launchable, amongst other things. How has this transition been?
Um, well, I guess, I mean, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's always wonderful to look at gaining experience into other any professional practices,
Mm,
be it product or finance or whatnot, or
mm,
sales for that matter. So I think when I switched from software engineer at Sun to CTO at Kirby's, that's really the kind of major shifting point, which
mm,
I was at first like forced to do things that I'm not necessarily good at.
mhm,
And then every time I feel like I'm getting the hang of it, the company kind of is continuously getting bigger. So your role kind of also shifts. So you're perpetually feeling like you're
mm,
not good at what you do. So in that sense, I think the Launchable is very much a continuation of that. So um,
mm. So, what would you recommend to like engineers who want to spread their wings beyond engineering? How should they think about it?
um, see the yeah, well, so I guess my retroactive 2020 hindsight would be, like you just go do it, really. Um, and if you find the environment to be hostile, like, when I started Jenkins, like I didn't ask for permission, really.
Mm,
I just did it. And but the environment turns out to be supportive. But if it's hostile, like, like how Oracle was, then, then you just move on because there are places that let you be
mhm,
that want you doing these things.
mm,
Because I believe in just kind of doing it, and then like that would create the question mark or
mhm,
things that you want to do differently next iteration, and that's how you kind of go do the gradient descent and like go make incremental progress. Um,
mm,
what was really helpful in Gravis was I had so many pros, actual pros with experience, whether it's the marketing or the sales or
mhm,
the finance people. And then, like, since in a small startup, you get to talk to these people. So I kind of tell them about my understanding of what they're doing there. And then they engage me back. And then from that process, you start to understand what they're trying to do, which is actually somewhat difficult sometimes to infer from what they're actually doing.
mhm,
Like there's this ideal version of what they want to be doing versus in reality, like what they have to do. And then so you kind of want to understand what in their like a mental mind, how they see themselves. Training was also helpful. You put me into this product management training once, and that
mhm,
was another opportunity in which I could see how the product managers aspire to do things as opposed to how they actually do things today.
mhm,
So I understand that. Oh, so this when they are doing this clumsy thing, this is the actual like the most idealistic version of it is that, and then
mm.
they're connecting that gap and trying to help them in fixing that gap. That's very useful. So, and that was a very
That
helpful.
that advice of like going and putting yourself in a different place is very useful. I transitioned maybe like a decade before you did out of engineering, and I would just show up to a quote unquote guerrilla marketing team in the Java EE organization. And I kept doing that, and after a while, it's like I was just started to being invited into those places. and then I became part of that team eventually.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So the next question that I have is like everybody who's trying to build a company today is building a company on data
Mm.
and AI and so on. And we certainly sort of, as we were thinking about this, the first problem that we had was how do you get to data, right? I'm,
Mm.
I'm not talking about building a company that's sucking data off the internet and doing something of it, but like when you're in a particular domain, how
Yeah.
did you bootstrap this? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really like that. That is one of the major struggle here, right? Like I think in the very beginning, we used the data from the open source. So, open source projects, large open source projects actively developed, and we look at how their tests are running. But I mean, we knew that that the actual enterprise software development scene is going to be very different.
mhm,
But we are not going to get access to those right away. And then we did eventually, like after a good long while, like we cracked some initial customers, and then like we were able to get data out of their hands, and that did help us boost to the next stage. And so, yeah, I think those we have to do it in that order, right?
mm,
But that really took a precious time.
right.
Yeah.
And I think the problem was really underappreciated by people around that time, right? It's like, all right, you just can't get into an enterprise and say, give us data.
Yeah. Yeah.
This model of going into open source and picking something up, building something like a toy prototype, and then taking that to enterprises is
Right.
perhaps something people can think about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think it's everybody has these challenges, especially in this data as data when in the world where data is a crude oil.
Hmm.
In the world where Reddit is shutting down their API access to the third party because they want to sell this data on their own. Like, the
Hmm.
access to the precious, like, sizable amount of data is getting harder.
I
Yeah.
believe Google paid about $60 million to get to the Reddit data.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure that it's a jump change for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one area that you and me kind of constantly butt heads on is like, this question on like taking product to an MVP and what
Mm.
defines an MVP. And if you go out, uh, there's everybody talking about like, you know, what does this look like? How do you think about taking nascent products to MVP? How do you think about
Yeah.
the journey?
Yeah. I think my go-to mentor model is still that of Jenkins. That
Mm,
is, in the early days, like I had essentially like a one customer, which is my own team.
mhm,
Um, and I was, like they were engaged because they are my colleagues, and this
mm,
was a service that I was running for them. And so, they gave me suggestions, and I had my own ideas about what I might be able to do. And not everything is gonna stick, but like eventually, so well, not everything might be the optimal next thing to do, right? Like you're playing in this general density, so but over time, like you amass enough value in there, and then it's really like the mass of values that create enough of aha moments, and then it starts to like you notice because it starts to spread on its own.
mhm,
So that might be actually waiting too far out, right? Because like there is a value in actively trying to spread the word, and that is one thing I wasn't doing in Jenkins, but nonetheless, I think the first set of guys that you're working with really needs to be like your stuff needs to be like so good that they are such a believer. Um,
mm,
and then in my case, like I'm probably good at solving this. The risk in doing that is like you end up over specializing in one narrow problem. But
mm,
I like to think like I'm generally good at solving the problem in over general manner. So when
mhm,
those two things combine, I think it's a good mix. Um,
mm.
yeah, but
All right. So pick like some one or two handful of customers, go about satisfying them. Um, Look at problems in a general way so you don't
yeah,
become professional services team for the company.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
make
I
them.
think it's so like any. it's sort of like appeal to fundamental human psyche that like you have a small number of people that you're actively working with, and stuff you're doing is making them happy. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just like a fundamentally joyful process.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel it when like every maker knows that when you get into that
Mm-hmm.
stage, and so in some sense, like that phase dragging out is wonderful for makers. Now, for people who have money, that is a separate problem, right? Like you're just pouring money while you do that. So there's that. But I think fundamentally, like you can't, you can't. If the product needs to be good before the sales and marketing can really spread the word. I think
Mm-hmm.
that I still believe in that. Yeah.
So in this iteration that you've taken, like you built one of the most successful open source projects out there, and we built a company on top of it. And here you are talking about taking the project to hands of multiple people, but like you've not open sourced this. So like, what sort of the thinking here for you as you kind of, on one, yeah.
Yeah. I think unfortunately the golden age of open source is over. I mean,
Mm,
there was a time around like early 2000 where open source was strategically very meaningful. Like it's a way for vendors to collaborate or compete. It's a way for like engineers to build a career. It's because the library was I guess, the currency of exchange. Now
mm,
it's the services that's the currency of the exchange. So like you have all these freeloader programs that you end up seeing, like
mm,
a company after company, like, taking cloud sourcing the open source, like,
right.
Redis, HashiCorp, Elastic. It's just, yeah, it's a sad situation. It's like ladder gets pulled out under.
Mm,
Well, I climbed up that ladder, and then that ladder got pulled up, and so people
mm,
can't follow that path. It's
mm.
unfortunate. Yeah.
It is really unfortunate. All right, so I'm kind of getting to the home stretch. I have like a few questions here. So did you get any advice while starting Launchable? Lots of people give you advice. Something that stood out for you?
Yeah. I don't know. Um, so I mean, the best thing occurs to me is like I kind of need to get my hands dirty, and in that process, I need to let my questions to guide that effort. So that has been true. Is cycling, painting, it's all that thing. So advice is, in some sense, like it really only makes sense retroactively in the rearview mirror. Like
Mm,
now that you've done it, like you can see that how so true some things were, but like
mhm.
that, you didn't understand it when like back then. But
Yeah.
so that makes this question hard. But the one thing that like I think stood like pretty strongly in my mind over these years is this like a notion that the sell, design, and build in that order. I think this came
Hmm.
from like our beloved John Briones. He's
Yeah.
very
Who
very
is quoted way more than he would,
yes,
he thinks.
yeah,
He would.
yeah.
Yeah.
But this idea, I think, to the extent that I understand where he's going,
Yeah.
like you have to find this like fast test that the problem is painful and desperate enough before you like start building the solutions, and it's so kind of counterproductive into the hearts of the makers.
Right.
So that's the hard part. So but I don't. So on this one, I do feel like we remember like that we took that to the heart. Not in the rearview mirror. But it's actually like a very like in a forward-looking manner. So I'm trying to think like why that was the case. Maybe it was like perhaps some challenges in launching new products out of Cloudbeast that kind of like open me like help me see the light in this idea from the get-go. But whenever I tell that to other people, like they are just like, but how can you sell a product that doesn't exist? Okay, I see that. Yep, it's not just me who don't understand these advices like in the forward-looking manner.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of wisdom in that advice. So, John, if you
yeah,
ever listen to this, thank you. We kind of go at this even today after 4 years down.
yeah,
The other one that stood out to me was from David. He was also, David's
David Scott.
he's a blog. Yeah, David Scott from For Entrepreneurs. His thing about like these, his whole paper and treats you on aha moments and mini aha moments and getting people walking through this has, those two have really stood out for me.
Yeah.
So that would that be your one advice that you would recommend people as they're starting a company is sell, design, and then build?
Yeah, I guess, knowing that it's gonna fly right over their head, yes. But still, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the last bits here are like when you start this journey, you always kind of envision it going a certain way. You're walking up this path, and you kind of call out like, yeah, this path is not going to look like this, but when you actually walk through it, there is a difference, in the experience. So what panned out exactly how you thought it would, and what didn't pan out? What was the most surprising thing in this journey in the last 4 years?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I knew that you're never gonna, I think going in this time around, unlike the first time at Travis, I knew like I have no idea what I'm gonna get into, and I think that part found out right. Like just I can remember it turned out to be a very wonderfully different than what we anticipated. Maybe another part that did pan out is, like I always thought it's very important to do who we do it with. So, I think that, me choosing you in that endeavor is very much in that spirit. And also when we pick the additional members of the team, that's always an important factor in us, right? So I knew that I'm working with people who I enjoy working with. And I think that part largely,
Find out.
Yeah.
All right.
The thing that didn't pan out the way I envisioned is that I ended up creating an engineering team in Tokyo. That was a pleasant surprise. Like certainly had no intention in the get-go, but sometimes. Well, so I guess we had a real struggle hiring people in the US at the price that we needed to hire them for. And then so I think at some point it just felt like, okay, this is this is an opportunity like that.
Right.
I always wanted to bridge that to tech world, and I know these capable engineers over there. I know we have some attractions as a US tech company, and the exchange rate is so that they are very affordable. So I was in one of those. It's one of the few examples where like you can connect the passion with the business rationality, right? Like that's really like kind of key struggle in anything. So that was a success case. Like I guess you and I have been talking about this diversity in hiring, and that's another example where I was at Cloudbees, and I think the one person that the community manager that I hired, like she said 1 year the annual planning, like this year my goal should be like to recruit the contributors to the Jenkins project from this untapped area like Africa, for example. And I was like, yeah, great, but wait, like is that it? Like, is that gonna be the priority? I don't know. Like, I have other things that I wanted to do. It's a good thing, but I have better things I wanted to do. So those are like where things get really hard is like you can't the right thing you want to do or like the right thing for the society or whatever is just like a lose out this battle of priority. And then this was around the time my daughter was in high school, and she went to this girls only school. So I go there and I see all these like motivational slogans that's plastered around the high schools, and I could really see that they are trying to. Well, the message that I learned from there is like they really need to arm these high school girls to show up, put on the armors and big girl pants on and the swords so that they can fight for their rightful place in the society. And then in my high school, like I had none of those. So I felt like, so those things kind of started like, I had some profound impact on me. So I'm trying to look for opportunity there like whenever you can just get like a combine the like a social whatever good with the business rationality, then you can amplify better things. And so those are like opportunities that I look for. Yeah. So at least I could make one of them happen here, which is good.
Right. So, like, you've spoken about the Japan team. One of the things, some things are also very stereotypical. As an Indian, growing up, India and Japan have like a very close bond, I think. And looking in, you kind of always know Japanese people are very cooperative. They follow rules, and these are stereotypical things, and they still stand out here, which is the team is amazing in how one of our values is play as a team, and how the team sticks together and plays together and is looking out for each other. That was very interesting to see on how that operated.
Yeah.
So that stood out. And then for me, the definition of diversity, I realized like diversity just such a broad definition. It can mean anything and anywhere, because you can look at it from other angles. So I also see that, right? It's like, oh, in the context here, bringing in a Japan team is diverse. So that's interesting. Personally, I want to actually get to a place where I'm also bringing some Indians into the team and growing that. So hopefully we get there in the next couple of years.
Yeah, you never know what door opens around the corner. Yes.
Yes. All right. So this brings me to the end of it. And you have worked with me enough to know that one of my favorite sort of questions is, if you're thinking about, entrepreneurship or people building data or AI, any question that I should have asked that I didn't?
I really can't think of any. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a cop out. All right, Kohsuke, thank you so much for doing this. And well, I'll see you around in a meeting maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. And good luck with the podcast endeavor.
All right. Let's see.
From the sideline. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.